Mental illness is a medical problem that affects everyone of every racial and ethnic background. That includes African Americans, but all too often there's a gap between need and treatment.
There are major barriers to effective mental health care in the African American community.
Overcoming those barriers starts with awareness. Guided by former U.S. Surgeon General David Satcher, leading medical experts in the mental health field, and real people in treatment, this program will provide you with information and even inspiration about getting help for mental illness. Dr. David Satcher knows what it is to be at the very top of his profession. He served as Surgeon General of the United States, but he grew up in the rural South and knows firsthand how hard it can be to access health care when you need it.
So that has been, I think, for me, a driving force throughout my life and career, that I want to be in a position to make a difference for people who have often left out when it comes to health care and the health care system.
When it comes to getting care for mental illness, African Americans face not only costs and insurance issues, they also must overcome their own discomfort.
The stigma is real in the African American community when it comes to mental illness, and therefore denial of the problem on the part of the individual, and then on the part of the community and family, there's often a failure to really push for a person to seek treatment.
That's one of the reasons Dr. Satcher released a groundbreaking report on mental illness when he was Surgeon General, and it's why he continues to help shine a light on this subject.
The good news is that we now know so much more about mental illness than we did before.
It felt like I was in a bottomless pit. And no matter how hard I reached, I wasn't getting out of it.
Denise has something in common with 1 in 4 American adults: mental illness. It can be triggered by life events, or you can be born with a difference in the way your brain works that puts you at risk. When the brain doesn't work the way it should, a person's mood, energy level, thinking, even personality can change. Mental illness is a medical problem, and medical treatment is needed.
We know from the studies that we've been doing, the research that's been done over many years, that there are chemical imbalances and things that come into play with certain types of symptoms, but we also know that things like faith, spirituality, determination, all of those things impact how we respond to life situations and the symptoms that people can experience with mental illness.
So we don't neglect a person's faith. We encourage people to be determined, but we want them to understand that if they don't address the illnesses as if they are brain disorders similar to addressing cardiac or heart problems or kidney problems, then it's not adequate treatment.
Mental illness comes in many forms. Some are fairly mild, others are so severe that a person may need care in a hospital or other institution. Anxiety can be a normal reaction to fear or stress. When it gets out of proportion to the situation, however, it can become the form of mental illness called an anxiety disorder.
So, for example, If you're suddenly frightened, you're going to have an increase in heart rate or shortness of breath or nervousness. But when those symptoms are sustained and extend to situations throughout the day that aren't associated with sudden fright, then we start to think about it as an anxiety disorder.
You may have heard of anxiety disorders such as panic attacks and obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD. Anxiety may also be caused by social situations, or people can have what's called generalized anxiety disorder. And some people suffer from phobias, specific fears, such as fear of heights. Robert has a kind of anxiety disorder called post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. It stems from experiencing physical harm or the threat of harm. He had just returned from the Vietnam War when he first felt the symptoms: sudden fear, anger, and distress.
I was having nightmares and flashbacks and things like this here, and I wasn't sure what was happening with me.
The term PTSD had not yet been invented, but Robert found he had plenty of company. Other veterans were suffering just as he was.
So PTSD was a foreign word at this time, but there was doctors within the hospital that was working to really and truly get a cure and to get an answer to what was happening with these veterans.
Depression is a mood disorder, a serious medical illness that affects how you feel, think, and act. It could affect anyone, regardless of their circumstances.
So normal sadness, you might have a bad day. Sometimes in the African American culture we call it the blues, where there's a bad situation going on and we feel sad in response to that situation. But in depression, the situations can be bad, or there may not be any severe stress, but the symptoms are still there and continue long term and affect an individual's ability to function.
I had lost my mother, and all I wanted to do was sleep. I didn't have no strength to get up out of the bed. I pushed myself to go to work. I would cry, didn't know why.
And help is available.
When Tanya saw a presentation about depression at her church, she realized that's what she had, a feeling she had been hiding for years.
When I got around people, I always put a phony smile on when I was just like hurting on the inside, just wishing that somebody really realized that I was hurting, but nobody picked up on it. Nobody picked up on it.
The primary signs of depression are that the person feels sad, lacking in energy, or has no interest or pleasure in normal activities for at least 2 weeks.
Symptoms that loved ones notice are isolation, not interacting as much with family or friends, not doing things that people would normally do and that they normally enjoy.
Other symptoms include sleeping or eating too much or not enough, agitation and restlessness, feelings of worthlessness or guilt, inability to think, concentrate, or make decisions, recurring thoughts of death or suicide. Tanya was on the verge of taking her own life, but her loved ones recognized she was in danger and took action.
I called my son and I said, I love you, and the only thing I want you to do is take care of my grandchildren. And he like, Mom, what you talking about? I said, that's all right, don't worry about it. And he called the lady across the street and then called my sister, and the ambulance and the police came. And I was like, whoa.
Now, Tanya is successfully managing the kind of depression called a major depressive disorder. It's a potentially life-threatening disease that leaves people feeling hopeless and emotionally exhausted. Jobs, relationships, and life activities are all affected. Another common form of mood disorder is bipolar disorder. It can cause dramatic mood swings from very low and sad to high and energetic, often with normal feelings in between. The symptoms of the high phases, called manic episodes, can be alarming.
speaking very quickly, thoughts racing very fast, doing impulsive and possibly dangerous things like spending all of our money at the mall or walking for miles and miles and aimlessly or having risky sexual behaviors. All of those types of things are what we call manic symptoms that are part of a bipolar disorder that make it different from just a regular depression.
So the person who's experiencing it, especially when they're manic, may not see themselves as needing any help, but people around them see it.
Schizophrenia is a severe brain disorder that can cause people to have delusions or hallucinations. They might feel people are plotting against them or hear voices that are not real.
My particular challenges are auditory, meaning I hear things that most people don't hear.
Schizophrenia usually strikes people in their 20s. Some people, like Damien, don't realize they have an illness, but others might notice something's wrong. Damien tried to follow a family tradition of military service, but both the Army and the Air Force discharged him.
I wasn't aware of the fact that I had any personality disorder or any real mental challenges prior to going into the service, but leave it to Uncle Sam to identify and pinpoint what is a little quirky about an individual.
What Damien calls quirky is a serious illness. For a long time, he struggled with his symptoms. Finally, he wound up in the hospital where he learned more about the disease and how to manage it. People with eating disorders might eat too little or overeat and then vomit so they don't gain weight. These can be dangerous behaviors and should be treated. When someone uses substances like drugs or alcohol despite harmful consequences, that's an addiction. Addiction itself is a long-term brain disease, but it could be connected to other mental health problems as well.
The fact of the matter is that substance use often begins with an attempt to deal with an undiagnosed, untreated mental disorder.
Robert was in torment before he got a diagnosis and treatment for PTSD. He says he and other veterans were self-medicating in self-destructive ways.
There wasn't any kind of therapy for Vietnam veterans that were suffering with this, and the easiest thing to do was to get a bottle of liquor or get some drugs to try to put some of the horrors that was giving you problems behind you.
Using these substances usually makes a mental illness worse over time. Treating mental illness therefore often means treating substance-related disorders at the same time. ADHD is a mental disorder that can affect both children and adults.
Go!
Common symptoms include impulsiveness, acting quickly without thinking, hyperactivity, the inability to sit still or wait for a turn, or the inability to focus on a task or pay attention.
In terms of the African American community, we know that it's prevalent, but particularly in adults, it's not often treated because people don't seek help for it, and mainly because they're not aware of the possibility of having ADHD as an adult.
Many children who have been diagnosed and treated for ADHD by a physician may improve their attention, concentration, and learning. Treatment can be helpful for adults, too, on the job and in relationships. All of the disorders and diseases we have described are mental illnesses, but there is a connection to physical health.
People that are experiencing other medical issues need to let their provider know what's going on, if only because certain physical illnesses can impact mental illness, so it's important to know about that. Plus, certain medications that are used to treat those illnesses can impact mental illness and or interact with mental illness medication, so it's very important to let your provider know.
Also keep in mind that African Americans are more likely to come to a healthcare provider with complaints of physical symptoms that in fact are caused by a mental illness.
And they might be very reluctant to even approach a mental health provider. So the types of people that African Americans tend to get help from might be clergy and primary care providers long before they seek traditional mental health services.
Denise has degrees in psychology and business. She uses them both in her job at the National Alliance on Mental Illness, or NAMI. One day a few years ago, the organization saved her life.
That particular day, I had planned on committing suicide. I had saved up all of my medications, and I was going to commit suicide that evening. And I was just taking a bus ride thinking about doing that, and I saw the NAMI sign.
The care and hope Denise found at NAMI ended years of depression and loss. The downward spiral began in the midst of a high-powered government career.
I was traveling, and I was at a location that military installation, and I got where I couldn't function. I couldn't make important decisions that I needed to make for the team. And I went to the military hospital, and they advised me to go home. So they gave me an escort off the base.
But the symptoms did not improve at home, and Denise wound up in the hospital. She was discharged with the diagnosis of major depression and post-traumatic stress disorder stemming from an attack when she was a teenager.
I quit my job. They didn't ask me to leave. I quit out of the shame of having been hospitalized in a psychiatric hospital. And then I got even more depressed. And the result was divorce. And the children chose to live with their father. And I became homeless.
By the time she discovered NAMI, Denise had found a place to live. Now she has a place to thrive. She has also reconnected with her children. A key to her success is a close working relationship with a mental health professional who provides both medication and counseling.
My psychiatrist is wonderful, and he listens to me. We made my treatment plan. I mean, every step of the way, it's a partnership.
Many African Americans have relationships that allow them to talk openly to a trusted friend, family member, or spiritual counselor. Psychotherapy or talk therapy is based on the same idea. The person you talk to is trained about mental illnesses.
And the therapist provides an objective ear, a non-judgmental ear that allows the person to look at themselves and determine how well they're functioning and where they would like to progress in terms of their functioning and the way they deal with past issues or current stressors or relationship issues or illness issues.
You were saying that sometimes your mood gets down. Tell me some about the depression.
There are many types of psychotherapy. It can take place in one-on-one sessions, with family members, or in groups. For Tanya, talk therapy provided the opportunity to open up about the depression she had kept to herself. But first, she had to learn how a patient and psychiatrist work together.
He just wanted to hear me talk and stuff and tell him my problems. And then I thought he was awesome because he didn't write no note down. He gave me his undivided attention, and I was like, that's what I like.
For some mental illnesses, using a medicine plus talk therapy could be successful.
What we like to think is that it's not either or, that a lot of times it's both. And when you just use medication and not the talk therapy, sometimes you miss an opportunity.
Just as some people take medicines daily for diabetes or high blood pressure, many people take a medicine every day for a mental illness.
The challenge in the African American community is that it's difficult enough to get some individuals to come for therapy, let alone medication. So people worry about the side effects, the stigma of taking medications, how long they're going to have to take the medications.
Each patient's needs are individual. Some medicines for long-lasting conditions may need to be taken on a lifelong basis. Other medicines are taken only when a person needs them. If you have questions or concerns about medications, bring them to your healthcare provider right away.
The best thing that the person can do is come in and tell their doctor, this is working, this is not working, this is why. The symptoms are better or the symptoms are worse. I'm having side effects or I'm not, so that the two can work in partnership to find a medicine that works with as few side effects as possible.
Other treatments for mental illness include electroconvulsive therapy, or ECT. This stimulates the brain with non-harmful pulses of electricity.
Electroconvulsive therapy can be very helpful in treating severe and resistant forms of mental illness.
Studies indicate African Americans are more likely than whites to try alternative therapies, such as herbal remedies. These can interact with other medications in a harmful way. It's important to talk to your healthcare provider about any alternative therapy you consider. You can boost your chances of recovery from a mental illness in many ways. Strengthening your mind and your body can help relieve stress. Exercise can mean anything from a workout at the gym to doing chores. If you have been inactive, talk to your healthcare provider before powering up.
There's so many benefits of exercise, it's hard to even list them all. Exercise gives you a strong body, it gives you a strong mind, and all of those things help to improve the symptoms of mental illness.
Damien gets exercise and relaxation with the ancient motions of Tai Chi.
I haven't been an active martial artist for years, yet and still I enjoy the meditative nature of communing with a higher power. And Tai Chi is sort of meditation in motion. That's really what it amounts to.
Of course, there are more common ways to meditate and relax, including yoga and breathing exercises.
I wouldn't say that yoga or relaxation can cure mental illness, but it can definitely make it better. And it gives you tools to use in those times when you're stressed or anxious or symptoms are getting bad.
I do meditation where I listen to instrumental, soft instrumental music or nature sounds, and I just think about what good happened during the day, whether somebody gave me a seat on the bus or whether one of my coworkers told me that she loved me and gave me a big hug.
Denise brings her positive spirit to the support group she runs. Groups like these are a way to connect with others who understand what you're feeling and can share their experiences.
I started out at NAMI as a participant in the support groups, and the support groups saved my life. My message is that recovery